And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, first up, we've got a NOAA Weather Radio announcement here for a NOAA Weather Radio outage that begins 2 p.m. Friday, August 25th, and lasts through the weekend, and actually through Monday until 5 p.m. Monday, August 28th. Affects stations Utah-Gavik, Kotzebue, Nome, Bethel, St. Paul, Unalaska, Cold Bay, Yakutat. All of those stations will be down again from 2 p.m. Friday to 5 p.m. the following Monday. However, weather forecasts and warnings, as well as tsunami information, will continue to be available online at weather.gov and tsunami.gov. Okay, going to today's ice edge, not a lot, or ice chart, not a lot different from yesterday. We've got some thin ice from about Kaktovik here, Barter Island, all along the just along and outside the barrier islands here, up to near the Central Arctic coastal areas. And from there, we'll go to the tonight's forecast map. Low coming northward into the Bering Sea, bringing small craft advisory and gale force winds with it, and rain into the southwest interior Bristol Bay. First batch of moisture kind of tracks off to the northeast here with some showers up along the Alaska Range, maybe north of Talkeetna, actually in toward Denali Park, on up over toward the eastern interior, Eagle on down to Northway and Tok. Chance of showers tonight with definitely increasing clouds. And it stays fair over the Copper River Basin. Good shot of rain coming up through Cook Inlet into the Kenai Peninsula, especially late tonight with increasing southeast winds, east and southeast winds through the mountain passes here, south central Alaska, Chugach Range, Turnagain Arm. Low clouds and fog kind of increase across the panhandle, but winds stay light and conditions dry. Then for tomorrow, low tracks northward there to just southwest of Nunivak Island, and the front and rain spreading all the way up to the Brooks Range late in the day, front coming eastward, and look for some pretty gusty southeast winds, maybe up to 50 miles an hour through Turnagain Arm and through the mountain passes again to south central Alaska with this higher pressure off to the east here. And that low tracking up to this position. If the front stays just west of Cook Inlet, that's usually when you get the strongest southeast winds blowing. Anyway, becoming mostly sunny in the afternoon after morning low clouds and fog burn off, but that cloud deck will linger along the coast like it did today. And for Friday, low drifts into the Yukon Delta and weakens. So much moisture coming northward and southwest flow that over all of interior Alaska, all the way to the eastern Arctic coast, it'll be areas of rain and showers. But those showers will be decreasing, especially in the afternoon, south of the Alaska Range, south central Alaska, but a weak trough here will keep them going, eastern North Gulf Coast, possibly into Elfin Cove. And then mostly cloudy with some sun breaks, though, for the remainder of the southeast coast. Maybe a little bit more clearing down toward Prince of Wales Island, Ketchikan, over toward Stewart and Misty Fjords. Next system here, spreading wind and rain back into the eastern Aleutians, up across the Alaska Peninsula and southwest Kodiak Island later in the afternoon into Bristol Bay. As that after Friday, this will track northeastward as well into the first day of the weekend. And for the coastal water forecast, light winds for all the coastline here, north or west to northwest to north, north to northwest, all 10 knots. And then variable 10 to 15 knots for the north coast. Lynn Canal, south winds 10 knots, southwest 15 for Stevens Passage, northwest at 10 for Clarence Strait. And for Friday, Lynn Canal, southeast winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Otherwise north for Stevens Passage at 10 knots, northwest 15 for Clarence Strait. Northwest winds 15 to 20 knots there for the south coast, and west-southwest at 10 for the central coast, and the north coast east to southeast 10 to 20 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. Prince William Sound for Thursday, southeast winds 15 knots, and variable 20 here for the eastern North Gulf Coast, becoming southeast at 20 for the western North Gulf Coast. Barren Islands, increasing southeast winds to 30 knots. Gale warnings developing for Kamishak Bay tomorrow, seas building to 10 feet as those winds out of the east pick up to 35 knots. Cook Inlet, northeast winds 10 to 20 knots. And then on Friday, small craft advisories for south winds at 25 knots here for Kamishak Bay. All of Cook Inlet with 7 to 8 foot seas. Barren Islands south at 20, southwest 15 for the North Gulf Coast. And for the Prince William Sound zone, south winds at 20 knots. Kodiak Island, south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots for the day on Thursday, seas 5 to 7 feet. Small craft advisories here for the Alaska Peninsula. South winds 25 to 30 knots, seas as high as 10 feet. And Bristol Bay, southeast winds 25 knots, seas only 3 feet though. And then those drop off to 15 knots from the southeast, but seas get a little higher, up to 4 feet. And east to southeast winds, 15 to 25 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Southwest, 20 to 25 knots for Kodiak Island. For the eastern Aleutians, west to southwest winds, 20 to 30 knots. Seas up to 10 feet. And light variable winds for Adak and Atka. And variable to northwest winds, 10 to 15 knots for the western Aleutians. For Friday, north winds 15 knots there west of Adak. And then for the central Aleutians here over to about Atka, north winds 25 knots with 4 to 6 foot seas. Small craft advisories for the eastern Aleutians for north to northeast winds 25 to 30 knots. For the southwest coast, southern Nunivak Island, southeast winds 30 knots. Tomorrow, east 20 for the Yukon Delta coast. Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, small craft advisories, northeast winds 25 knots. Northwest 30 knot winds with seas just under 10 feet for the Pribilofs. North at 30 for St. Matthew Island. For Friday, Norton Sound, north winds 15 knots. West 15 for the Yukon Delta coast. Northwest at 10, pretty light for St. Lawrence Island. Small craft advisory, St. Matthew Island, north winds 30 knots, seas 10 feet, 20 knot northerlies for the Pribilofs, southwest 25 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast with 6 foot seas. And we've got here for the Chukchi Sea, northeast winds 20 to 25 knots for Thursday, western Arctic coast, northeast at 10, and then west winds at 10 knots for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And then for Friday, small craft advisories develop here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for east-northeast winds coming up to 25 knots, northeast to 20 for the western and central coast. And for the Chukchi Sea, small craft advisories, north to northeast winds 25 to 30 knots.